my chest right in the morning, like a warning. Could have slept here for days. I felt your heartbeat, felt your mouth breathe, but it's not real. We were close to see the sun, but clouds got in our way, and so.
Greetings friends, and top of the morning to you. This morning I'm getting busy right here in our garden transplanting lettuce. And I'm sure you're probably saying, Mike, it's almost July and you're still growing lettuce. Well, actually I am. And my goal this year has been to grow lettuce year round for 52 weeks throughout this year, to grow lettuce and other greens. So that way I'm always having greens to harvest. And so far I've been pretty successful in that goal. And as you can see right here, I've been growing arugula. And in other parts of the garden, I've been growing arugula and lettuce so far this year without a problem with a number of the techniques that I've learned. And this morning, I'm putting lettuce right here in these beds. But let me tell you, growing the lettuce hasn't been the most challenging part of this area that I've been working on in the garden. Actually prepping this soil and prepping this area, now that was the challenge. Let me tell you, it was quite the workout. My muscles and body was feeling it after I completed this project. What about you? Have you had a day of work or a workout or something where you were just feeling it for the next couple days? Well, that was me in prepping this area. For starters, for those of you who don't know already, a majority of our property is on a slope, and it slopes down and descends to where we have our pond. However, a challenge with having a property that is on a slope is if you get any sort of significant amount of rain, it's going to wash away your topsoil gradually, and anything that you try to grow, whether it be seeds or plants, it's going to wash them away. And we had that happen the first year or two while we were trying to garden here on the farm. So I learned pretty early on that with having a slope, I needed to terrace out the land to make it more efficient for growing things, and it has worked out excellent for creating terrace on this property. However, one of the biggest challenges with terracing out a slope is the process of actually doing so. It can be quite labor intensive, and I've done parts of it by hand, and we've also used an excavator as well. But this portion here is an area that I use a combination of the excavator, because when you're creating a terrace within a slope, you're digging out the high part and making it where you're putting the soil at the lower part so you can kind of have somewhat of an even terrain. And that's what we did here. Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How we doing?
Good.
Doing good.
Who's gonna help me transplant some lettuce?
Me.
You are. Well, let's knock it out. So Lacie, if I could have you help me transplant, that would be fantastic. Would you be willing to do so?
I can do that.
Fantastic. And Micah, can you help Mommy? You can use the dibbler. You want to use the dibbler to make holes while she helps transplant? Way to go. There you go. Turn it around, pick it up. Next hole. There you go, next hole. Boom. Good job. Make another hole. There you go. Let's come right here too. Let's go. Just punch it, go bam. 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 So as you can see here, we're making some significant progress. Yet even though we're making progress, we'd be making even more progress if we were dealing with better potting mix here. This is actually a blend that I am making. I'm trying to experiment with making my own potting mix, just because I don't like going to the store and all that. I want to learn to make my own. So with the soil not holding together well, we are having to take a little bit more time in transplanting these. So it makes the process just a little bit longer than it should. I should have had more clay in this potting mix. In this one that I used here, we have a little bit more clay, so it's actually holding things together a little bit more. So as you can see here, it's actually holding a clump together. So that should be easier. So I'm experimenting and learning to try to make my own potting mix. And speaking of clay, clay is what we have to deal with for our soil here. And for a majority of us here in the South, clay is what we have for soil. We get a lot of comments from time to time for people saying, why do you till? Stop tilling. Let the earthworms and all that do your job. However, if it wasn't for tilling, we would not be able to grow some of the things that we're growing, or we'd have to spend an enormous amount of money bringing in loads of compost to put on top of the clay. Because our clay here can be so hard, it's actually hard and difficult for the tiller to break it up from time to time. There's even been times where we've used a sledgehammer to break up the clods. So as I was working on building up this area, I was taking the clay that we currently had, then we brought in some compost. And then I till it by blending it in, and gradually over that process of bringing in compost, tilling it in and blending it in with amendments and the clay and then the compost, they make a nice blend that gradually builds the soil over time to where it's loose and rich with organic matter and easier to work in. Because when you try to just plant straight into this clay, it doesn't work. And I could try to let it sit over time and let chickens do it, but then that would be time that we'd be losing out on growing things. So as I began the process of prepping these beds here to grow things in, I first brought in the broad fork to aerate the clay that is there, and that was a little bit of work doing that. Next, I brought in some of the compost and blended it in with that clay and added some amendments as well. Next, after that, I dug trenches for the walkways in between the beds. And this works really well for making earthen raised beds and really helps divert water flow. It just helps with making sure that your plants are not sitting in water. And if you thought that that was hard, the really hard part came when I had to do the other two beds. These first two beds, well, they took maybe about 10 wheelbarrow fulls of compost and soil that I had to bring in. But these other two beds, they took about 40 wheelbarrow loads of soil and compost. So I added wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow load after wheelbarrow load after wheelbarrow load full of soil and compost. And let me tell you, I definitely got a workout in. Pushing a wheelbarrow around after a certain time is definitely a good workout for your forearms. So maybe that's why I had the forearms that I do. Your core, your legs, it just wipes you out. And as I was doing that, the kids were working right beside me, working on widening and clearing out the walkway. Use those legs a little bit more. Come on guys, we're almost done. Keep it going. Come on guys, let's pull it together. We're almost done. I know we're getting tired. Let's finish the job. So to answer the question why I till, one is because we are dealing with hard, heavy clay. And that hard, heavy clay is hard to work with. It's hard to work with it and build the soil up and make it loose, so that way it's easier for the farmer to plant things in and work with. And it's also hard for the plants to roots to develop and spread out and get the nutrients that they need and absorb the water that they need. As well as tilling is a way to help us accelerate building up the soil, because if it's easier to work in, it's easier to add compost to it and blend it and gradually build the soil up over time. We could bring in loads of compost, but that would be a super expensive way to get going. And most farmers don't have the budget to do that. And for those of you who suggest letting the chickens and the earthworms and all that build our soil up and loosen it up over time, well, that would take a course of a couple years, and most people don't have the time to do that. However, we do implement those methods and techniques within what we're doing, so that way we can gradually get to the point where we're tilling less and less. However, getting to the point where we just say we're not tilling at all is really not an option for us in our context, especially those of us who live in the South with this heavy clay. You need to find out what works for you and what is best for you in your context. Also, I mentioned earlier to tell me about a time that you've had worked so hard, because I had to work really hard in bringing all those wheelbarrow loads full of soil and compost into these beds, and it just absolutely wore me out over the course of a couple days and had to recover. It's pretty sore, so it was a pretty good workout. So definitely got my farm fit exercise in for today. Let me know about a time that you had, like I said, whether it was a workout that you had or a busy day on the job where you're just exhausted and you needed some time to recover. Well, I think the ladies here are ready for me to get back to work. That's it for today. We'll see you next time, and grow on.
Funny how the story goes, little hope but bigger dreams. They try to bring a sucker down, singing louder than the crowd.